Anyway, I decided to do an update on my coil winder. This new coil winder is a lot longer than the previous one, and I want to explain a few details about it because it's the distance between my crane, which pivots back and forth depending on the angle at which the wire is being pulled. So it basically keeps the wire in the center of this axis, and the previous coil winder was a lot shorter. I'll show you that one. So this is the previous one, so you can see based on the length how much longer this new one is. So I've stripped that one down. Actually, I've taken the bits off and put it on here. So there's a reason why I was having some issues previously with the wire angle being the wire angle was being pulled more to one side, and it kept skipping on the coils when I was winding the coils. So what I'm using now is a magnet which is mounted on the base of the pivot arm, and the magnet is basically attracted to this piece of steel which I've super glued onto the base of the magnet hole on the coil winder, so that the amount of back pressure is equal all the way along this piece of steel. So instead of, if I put a spring on there, the spring would either pull to one side, which would cause this to become less reliable. So by using a magnet attached to the base, the amount of back the amount of tension on the arm is equal all the way along. So it's always pressing down equal a certain amount, because this coil winder is only designed to wind these coils only. It's not designed to wind other coils. Now, another significant improvement, which is very important, is my follower, which is this piece of steel down here. I actually had to grind it on my grinder to get the shape right. So this piece of steel is shaped like basically, it's like half a washer really, but I ground it down to make it as thin as possible because it needs to be quite thin, so that when it follows the wire, when it tracks along this piece of wire, when it gets to the end stop, which is the end of the bobbin, if this is too thick, it will jump over the last winding as I'm coming to the end of the track. It will jump over that because it's too thick, because the thickness of the actual piece of steel will bump into the end stop, this end of the bobbin, prematurely. It causes it to skip, so that the last winding or the first windings that I'm doing are always a bit fiddly and tricky to do. So anyway, so what I've done is I've made that steel a bit thinner. The needle, which sticks out here, which the coil goes through, I'm trying to get the focus on that really, if I can. I'm trying to get the focus. Come on, focus. Right, focus. Alright, that's not too bad. Anyway, so that needle, it's critical of the angle of the pitch, the left and right, to align the wires properly. So I've got adjustment screws now. So get my little hook arm thing. So I've now got little screws which are actually there on this side, and there's also a screw on the other side which is there, which I tighten this one or loosen the one on the other side, which moves this blade which sticks out either left or right to get the angle correct for my wire. My wire is threaded through this little V-shaped thing here, which goes to my crane arm at the back. The wire is fed from the bottom, the spool, and it's always kept in the middle because it goes through this little thing at the bottom here. So there's a hole right at the base there. If I lift it up, you should be able to see it. There's a hole right there. So that wire goes to the center, so the wire is always kept in the center, so it never changes, which is an advantage because then it's fed through some friction, which is my rubber bands, through this little slot, and then it goes over the top of the crane, so it keeps the wire pretty much dead center all the time. So the only adjustments I really need to do is my crane arm, which I can move to achieve some back tension on it. Okay, I can move that while I'm going really. And I've also added some brackets for a magnifying glass mount now, so I can mount my magnifying glass basically like this. I get my magnifying glass, I just put that on into these slots like that. Oh, missed it. Right, so I've got my magnifying glass mount, which obscures just about everything, but when I come over the top you can see everything pretty clearly now down there. Now we're fiddling about with all this. I might have knocked it out of alignment. Let's just check. So, and now when I wind, I think I'm gonna knock the arm. Let's check. No, it's lined up. Right. So when I turn this arm, you'll see that the follower is always resting against that wire, and the pin is dropping the wire directly on next to that previous winding that was done. And right, so we can turn. I can go pretty fast actually with this. Sorry, I'm drifting. It's hard to hold the camera and point the camera and wind this thing at the same time. Oh, the other thing I've done, which you're going to find interesting, is my fast release mechanism. Magnets. Now I just clip these off because they're magnets. Take them off like this, and I can pop the whole assembly out of the jig when I want to swap the bobbin over, which is really easy, and I just pop them back on like this. Magnets clamp on, and this one like that, and it's really quick. I was going to use screws, which is why I put some holes there, and I thought, bugger it, I'm going to use magnets, why not? And it works very well. So let's just see how this works when I'm winding without the magnifying glass there, because actually the focus is crap. Oh, it's actually focused now. Look. Let's just lay another, and I can also go back if I need. I have to move this arm back though when I'm reversing it, because it kind of digs into the bobbin a bit, but you can see how it lays the wire. Really, really neat. And it's much more precise than the previous one I did, and I can actually crank pretty fast now if I want to do. But if it does lay a wire wrong, it means I have to backtrack a little bit, but that's not a big deal because I'm not counting turns, I'm just counting rows. Just as easy. If you're doing 4 rows neatly, you can work out how many turns there is per row anyway. So yeah, but you can see how well it works. It works pretty well. Occasionally I get some little gaps there, but that's because the surface I'm winding onto is a bit of paper, it's blue painter's tape, and if I get a crease on the tape, which you can see there's a crease on there, it sometimes knocks me a little bit off when I'm winding the wires. But yeah, it's not a big deal really. I can just backtrack if I need to do, but it is following the wire pretty well. Let's see if I normally hold this magnet down with my finger when I'm cranking the handle fast, and I can't do that when I'm holding the phone, and I'm worried about it popping off when I'm cranking by hand with one hand. I also need to hold the assembly as well, because the whole assembly it slides around a bit. But yeah, it works. That's the main thing. And I can pretty much wind coils at 45 RPM or 33 1/3, about the same speed as the record turns. I can go pretty fast, which is saving me an awful lot of time. So that's just a little update on the new coil winder. And it's this rubber band at this end just turns this wheel, which turns this shaft to reduce the friction so that the shuttle can move along more easily. Otherwise it tends to get stuck occasionally and it doesn't slide along where it should do, but because I'm rotating this shaft, it slides more easily. It just, you know, it's not screwing it, as in there's no thread there. It just reduces the friction on this so that this can slide more easily and always maintain the correct angle against the wire. and it doesn't really damage the wires because the blade is blunt. It's not really sharp. It's not too blunt, but it's enough that it will dig into the paper and follow the wire, because this shape, having this this little moon shape, works a lot better than a flat blade. When the blade was flat, it has a tendency to skip when it got to the middle. When it was resting in the center of here, it tended to slip. It kept dropping back. But because I've got the shape rounded now, there's always an equal amount of pressure on the bobbin, no matter where the bobbin is pressing on the back of this edge here. So it's always an equal amount of pressure. I'll try and get that on the camera as I'm turning it, so you can see what I mean. But if you look, the tip is pressing hard against the bobbin right now, and as I go around, you see that the angle is still equal amount of pressure right on that corner there. And as I go around, the tip, this is where it would normally skip at this point, but because it's dropping down the back, there's a lot more pressure there, so it doesn't slip. And then it goes round, and you can see how it works anyway. So that's the optimum shape. I just ground it and filed it so it's no longer a blade I'm using, it's just a piece of flat steel that I had. Yeah, so that's an update on the coil winder. I will see if I can put the camera in the stand a minute so you can see me go a bit faster. Just give me a sec. See if I can stick the camera on here. Right, let's try and go a bit faster. I've got my magnifying glass on here. Right, to be a bit higher up. Right, so I've got my magnifying glass on, so I hold this with my finger, and yeah, I've skipped. It has skipped there. It dropped back once, so, but it will go fast. I have to just lift it over that wire. I will have to go back. So what I do is I move the arm back like this, and then I just grab my coil and pull it back and reverse like this when I want to go back a bit. So that's what I do when I need to reverse, and then I just make sure my wire's laid right, and as I'm turning it, it will pull the arm forwards again. So occasionally it will slip a little bit, but yeah, that's because this surface isn't perfectly flat at the moment. I'll have to make more care. I am on the, let's see, 1, 2, I'm on the second layer right now. And that arm wants to come back a bit more. My crane wanted moving. That's it. So there we go. I don't really need to go that fast, but I'd prefer to do a good job than to rush it, you know what I mean? So I'll put my magnifying glass back on there. Actually, I don't know if it's blocking the view of the camera. Oh, it is. Oh, sorry about that, I didn't realise. See, the magnifying glass, the bracket is just, it's in the way. I'll take that off. So yeah, you get the idea. I'll try and do it without the magnifying glass on. Right, it's right on the end now. So anyway, I've got to finish this. I've got to go the other way in a minute. So what I do is I normally put a piece of tape and on the next layer. So let's see where I'll just back this thing out a minute, because it's hard to see when you're right on the end. When you're right up near the edge, the blade tends to catch and drop into that there's a little gully at the very top. So it's best to do the end manually, just to finish that off. And then I'll super glue the wire in place. So, right, so I'll get my super glue. Let's check with this magnifying glass that I've got it filled up. Yeah, it's more or less. So I'm just going to bring this to the top dead center like this. And super glue it. Then I'm going to put some tape on. And the best way of doing this with this contraption is I'm just spreading the super glue out with my nylon tool. It doesn't really stick to this very well. So what I usually do is I just get a bit of my painter's tape. Just cut a piece of this off. So I've got a nice flat surface for the next layer, and it's only about 0.1 millimeters. It's about 0.1 millimeters thick as this painter's tape. I measured it on my calipers. So what I basically do is I just put the tape on the back like this, so it's a straight line. Line it up with so it's in a straight line, and I don't super glue my finger to the coil because it's got super glue on it now. And I'll just drag it down a bit till I get to the end, the top end of the bobbin. I get my screwdriver and I'll lay it around the back, so I'm actually putting the tape on from the back. I slide my screwdriver along there to make sure it's nice and flat. And wrap the tape around make sure it's flat on the back, no creases. That's what I tried to do with my finger. This is why sometimes I get a crease and I can't see it. Then I pull the tape around the top. I'm trying to hold this so it doesn't. I'll just take that wire off there a minute so it's not going to get. So I can wind it over the top of the next layer. And I've got another crease there, which I'm trying to get rid of these frigging creases. It's what it can throw me off. You won't be able to see this because it's on the other side. I'm actually trying to lay this paper. It is paper, so it's painter's tape, and right. So right, I've got a frigging crease. I can't get rid of it. I'm just gonna have to hope for the best. So now I just have to lay this down on there. Right, I can wind another layer now. That's the slowest part really. It's when you're putting the tape on, you tend to get distracted with that for a while. And now I basically just move my crane arm back a bit, which you can't see, it's off camera, so that the crane arm is more to the right, so that the wire will be held quite tightly against this end. Oh, this wants to move a bit more. So I need to start the wire right close to this end of the bobbin. Oops, right, we're on the edge. Right, so there we go. Getting started is a fiddly part really. Just getting it started so that I've got enough, so this is resting up against the wire, and we need the wire to be established a little bit before we start trusting that and making sure that the wire itself is as far this way to the right as possible when we're starting to wind the next. So I'm just going to use my screwdriver to use my fingernail as well. I can't really see what I'm doing at the moment. Right. Once you get started right, then the rest of it pretty much follows. Just want to start at a nice straight line. Right, I think that's about right. My arm wants to come back a bit. This little arm wants to come back a little bit. Actually, it doesn't. It's just my wires aren't pushed up enough. It's always tricky getting it started at the end. If I get it crossed, the wires crossed, it just makes a mess of the next layer you're going to do. Mind you, I'm on the third layer now, the third layer, so I'll only go this way once and back, and that'll be it for this bobbin. This wire is catching on something, so this is the end. I don't want it to break off, obviously. Right, I think I'm there. Let's just try it. Could always back out if it's not right. So, are we doing 45 RPM? Probably 33 1/3. Well, considering, that's not bad. Let's have a look close up. Yeah, that's where we are at the moment. Yeah, so you can see how it works. Anyway, that's it for now. Tatty bye.